Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of the 2020 NFL Board podcast, the 4 turkeys, as it's now going to be known. And this week, the 4 turkeys, Brasher,
Good
Blackie.
evening, everyone.
How you going, Black?
Hello.
Fooey.
Morning.
And myself are joined by a special guest from the board, long-time veteran poster and participant in the board, Mr. Greywin. Welcome to the
Good
Turkey
evening.
Show, son.
Oh, thank you very much.
So this week, the focus of the podcast is first on tight ends. So we thought we'd do, because we reviewed the draft to death and we talked about some free agents. By the way, wasn't that a fantastic call that Brash made about Cam being done? Outstanding insights there. And bizarrely, Fooey actually got it right, saying that he'd be picked up by the Patriots. So you won't hear me say this very often, but well done last week, Fooey.
Oh, thank you. Occasionally I do know my stuff.
You know, technically we both could be right.
You're grasping at straws.
There's a chance. This week we'll move on to look at the tight ends. We talked a fair bit the first week of the podcast about George Kittle, so we won't overdo a reanalysis of him because I think he's pretty clearly the number one tight end out there. But Blackie, I'll start with you. What are some of the, developing tight ends that you'd regard as up-and-comers that would be worth looking at?
I think, in my opinion, there's a clear tier 1, and it's probably slightly controversial. Obviously, Kittle, which we've touched on, is there. I think most people regard Kelsey as 1B to Kittle's 1A, but I actually think Mark Andrews is making a push for the top tier. He's young. Quarterback, loves passing to tight ends. You know, he is more receiver than blocker, but can get his hands dirty. Outside of that, I think up and coming is Hockenson, Fant, and Gesicki would probably be my 3. I think probably the least heralded of those presently is probably Gesicki. Hockenson's got the draft capital, and Fant is also a first rounder coming off a pretty impressive rookie campaign. I think in terms of, probably overrated, I don't know about Hunter Henry. He's probably rated pretty high at the moment. He's coming off some pretty significant injuries. There's a question mark at quarterback for those guys. It'd be a risk, in my opinion, for him to, be taken in probably the top 6 or 7. In terms of underrated, especially for a fantasy point of view, I think Njoku's probably underrated. He hasn't set the world on fire, but his athletic profile is pretty serious, and he's competing with Hooper at the moment, who had a good season last season, but is broadly an unknown commodity going into a Browns team that definitely makes players look worse than they usually do. So
I agree on Gesicki. He really came on down the stretch last year, and I think hopefully I do have him in a couple of fantasy teams. So yeah, fingers crossed. The addition of Tagovailoa will make him even better. Honestly, Blackie's pretty much just kind of stolen all the thunder there, to be honest. I think we have very similar thoughts when it comes to tight ends. I like to think I know my way around a tight end.
Edit that out, please.
Sorry. I've lost it now. I guess I'm not sure where all the hype for Darren Waller is coming from. Yeah, he destroyed the Packers last time we played him, but I don't think that's really anything to crow about because we haven't been able to cover a tight end in years. So, yeah, I'm not sure where all the hype for him is coming from. Both him and Tyler Higbee, they'll probably, I think they're good for, your 2 catches, 30 yards. Probably, Waller's probably a bit more than that. But, yeah, I don't get it, to be honest.
I actually echo that, and I nearly said something to that effect, I think.
You blokes the Siamese bloody twins this week or something.
We've taken in turns in doing research because at the moment it's just too much. He was the number 1 dog there last year. They've gone out and spent a lot of draft capital on getting guys to pass to. His target share is probably going to go down. That said, obviously he's pretty athletic, but I definitely see downside there.
Brash, what is it about the tight ends that makes it so common for them to look really good one year, sign a mega contract, and then play like shit? Hello, Colby Fleener. Hello, Trey Burton. And hello, a dozen others. What is it about the position? Is it just that what a tight end does is so different in different schemes?
I think it's a bit of that. I think you're probably... I'll just draw one qualification of that, and that is the elite. And my illustrious colleagues have already highlighted most of the names. I disagree a little bit with what I heard before. I still think Kelsey's the number 1 tight end in the competition, as much as it pains me to say that. But I think he is. What is he? 5 Pro Bowls now.
You're just trying to play down his price.
Is that because Kittle's a wide receiver?
Yeah. Okay, so he's even a better blocking wide receiver than tight end then. You actually raised a good point, Blackie, in that you get a tight end that catches the ball, well, he must be wide receiver. Or if he blocks, well, he's only in there for blocking duties. Is he really a tight end, or is he just a sort of a spare parts tackle? The reality of it is Kittle does all that, but Kelsey's been doing it for a very long time, and he's had a number of quarterbacks throwing to him. So I don't totally agree with you, BPG, on the one-hit wonders. I think they can have stellar seasons. I know certainly Waller did, coming from nowhere. The only time I remember hearing that name was on Hard Knocks, yeah? And then all of a sudden he's come out of nowhere and had 90 catches. Will he do that again next year? I doubt it, given the Raiders are looking to change the way they go about their offense and, becoming more wide receiver-centric going forward. So I don't know. I agree with Theory. I don't think Waller's going to have that year, but I think you've got that elite. If you look at the top 10, pick the top half, better than average top 10 tight ends in the league. They're all pretty consistent performers. Ertz, Kittle, Andrews. Geez, we've got the Gronk back now. Cook. Don't be surprised if Delaney Walker re-emerges again. Higbee. They are good tight ends. Yeah. The guy that I'm most keen on seeing next year, that if I was playing fantasy football, is the sleeper for me is Jace Amaro at the Jets. He's a guy that second round pick a couple of years ago. He's been injured half of his career so far. I just see
a couple of years ago. I'd be surprised if it's in the last 5.
Maybe 4 years ago, then 5 years ago. I don't know. He's been injured so often, Blackie. I still remember him just being drafted. I think as his quarterback matures, I think so will he. And there's nothing more friendlier other than a pass catching running back than a solid tight end. And I think Amaro is going to be that for the Jets next year.
Selected in 2014.
Yeah, it's a couple of years ago. Time flies. 6 years ago. He's been injured the last couple of years.
And COVID's just affected a few people, just a couple of thousand, really.
That's right.
That's Brash's approach with numbers, Graywin. So what's your view, Graywin? From a Vikings perspective initially, I guess, how do you feel about your team's tight ends, and what are you seeing as you look around the league? Guys like Godot, Gesicki's had a mention. Who are the young ones that are up and coming?
I was going to say, well, I'm Packers, not Vikings. That's a bit of an insult.
Yeah,
there. That's
Thank you.
Poor.
Just double check. It's
a bit harsh there. I was going to take a different look. You've got the sort of older blokes who've been in the league a fair while in Howard, Ebron and Eifert, how they're going to go. They've moved around a fair bit as well. OJ Howard, I think he's still with the Bucks, and they've got Gronk coming in, so what's he going to do? He's a former first-round pick. The Bucks picked up Howard's fifth option. It's sort of a make or break year for him. And with Brady coming into town, he's probably going to target Gronk a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts looking elsewhere. But I agree with all the other guys that the top guys are pretty clear in Kelsey, Kittle and Ertz. There's a lot of other guys who can push into that top 5. From a Packers perspective, though, the cupboard's pretty bare. Jimmy Graham's left, so we've got Jay Sternberger as a second-year bloke. The old man in Mercedes Lewis. I don't even know who our third. I think it's Tonyan was our third tight end.
That's right.
We've got really nobody who can fill that pass catching role. Sternberger's got potential, but he's a second year bloke who was injured for at least half of last year. Yeah, I'm probably more interested in those sort of journeyman tight ends at the moment and what they're going to do, because they've all proven in play. They've been incredibly inconsistent, though.
Waller is probably a really good example of exactly that sort of player, a journeyman who suddenly's had a brilliant year, and the question becomes, can he pull it off in another year? What do you think of Chicago's approach to tight end management of having 10 on their roster?
Well, that's just throwing mud at the wall in 6. Like Jimmy Graham's just a walking corpse at this stage. He's got, I can't remember the Bears tight end at the moment. It's quarterback at the moment. It's not like he can hit him anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Mitch Trubisky, he wouldn't be able to. He couldn't. Jimmy Graham can't catch it, and Trubisky can't hit him. So sort of a nil draw there.
The match made in heaven.
Yeah, one guy who, well, if you go down to the Vikings, Rudolph, he hasn't really kicked on at all. He looked looked like he was going to be one of those top tier tight ends. He's never really progressed to that, whether that's more of his, the quarterback situation they've had there before they got Cousins. And Detroit, well, they've got Hockenson now, so he started off with an absolute bang in his first game. I think he went over 100 yards and maybe a couple of TDs. I don't think he did anything after that. He could be another Ebron for them. That would be disastrous for them. But it's Detroit, they're probably used to disasters by now.
That's actually interesting you bring that up. It's probably for all the fantasy players listening, it's a good hint where you're talking about Hockenson having a good first game, then doing nothing else. Don't jump on the first guy who has a good game. It's not necessarily going to happen throughout the whole year.
Oh, definitely not. I think I would be sticking away from any of the rookie tight ends at this stage. It's just going to be an absolutely up and down season, poor preparation. I think it's a write out for pretty much any rookie this year, apart from running backs.
So you'd be looking to add Jason Witten to your team?
I mean, he can still get open somehow. People probably just forget that he's there, and then eventually he just wakes his way slowly down the field. They've got to get his wheelie walk out of the way, but he still catches.
I think the opposition think he's out in the field doing an interview.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pretty good review of. I always find the tight end one of the more interesting positions because they play so differently in different schemes. Like some tight ends are basically just an extra O-line, blocking for the running back or trying to protect the quarterback. And then you got other guys like in the Eagles scheme for the last 2 years, pretty much. Ertz has probably been almost a wide receiver rather than a tight end. He hardly does much running blocking at all. Anyway, good discussion.
The Eagles don't have any wide receivers that are healthy.
Or that can play the game. We did have Aguilar. Now, there's a successful player. That probably is a really good segue into the first of our fantasy league reviews. So one of the things that we'll be doing on the Four Turkeys show is the turkeys, together with a guest each week, will be reviewing how one of the board fantasy comps has gone in their draft and providing some carefully considered, very balanced, highly professional, and very gentle advice to fantasy comp participants about whether they've done a good job in the draft or not. So to start off with, we picked the main comp that Greywind is involved in, and that's called the Flea Flicker League. So for those that aren't familiar with the competition, it's run on a website called Flea Flicker, surprisingly. And for me, it's got some really interesting features. You have to have squads of 40 players. There are 2 IR slots as well as the 40 players. But then it gets interesting because you have to have 20 starters mixed across pretty evenly across offensive players and IDPs. And I'll let Brasher and Blackie kind of draw this out a bit more, but there's some really interesting and quite unusual minimum requirements for the various positions. So it's the only league that I'm involved in where you have to start at least 2 tight ends every week. So just building off our discussion about tight ends, it's probably the only league I'm aware of where there are 24 tight ends starting every single week across the league. And it can also only play 1 quarterback. So that unlike a lot of other fantasy comps where you can load up on 2 or 3 good quarterbacks every week and they can score the points for you, this one really challenges you. We might let Greywind explain a little bit more about the background to the draft. I think it's a 10-rounder, yeah, Greywind?
Yes. Yeah, 10 rounds after we've got rid of all the people you don't want to keep anymore at the end of each season. And
it's not just rookies, it's also the available free agents too, yeah?
Yeah. They can be a little bit slow to update their player base. There were some players who were retired that you could still pick up at certain stages. I don't think anyone's done that this year, though.
I did try to get Antonio Brown, but anyway.
I'm sure you were trying to get bloody Joe Montana.
With that, I think, Brash, we might kick to you for a bit of a view of the different flex positions and how they're a bit unusual and why that you think that makes the league interesting. Come on, you're all over this last week. Gee.
I was all over it last week. I was really excited about the tight end.
And see, then he screws up on his prediction about Cam Newton. I pay out on him in the thread.
I did not screw up on his prediction about Cam Newton. He's been signed to a league minimum contract, mate. He may not see training camp. The jury's still out on that one, mate. You clearly must be a government official jumping to conclusions again.
Certainly, it's a unique league starting the 2 tight ends. I'm certainly not in any leagues that are like that. I also think that 2 quarterbacks is the way forward for fantasy, especially Dynasty. Having a look at the draft, it obviously did throw up some interesting things that happened, but even comparing, I guess, existing players to rookies and where they were taking in respect to the rookies, I found it quite surprising. I think Gronk Gronk was taken pretty early compared to some of the other players, and it is a dynasty league, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think he was taken, 6 rounds before Njoku, for instance, and he was taken before Jalen Reagor, who I would have thought had significantly more upside than a Gronkowski, who's I think is as cooked as Brasher thinks Cam Newton is.
Fui, can you give us a rundown of some of who the key board members are that play in this league? Obviously, there's the awesome fantasy power of myself and yourself, and we have Greywind kind of completing the trio of accomplishment. Who else is there?
Oh, well, clearly, yes, there's 3 of us. There is also, we've got Footy Punk. Oh, how do you say it? Manure ID? I know it's not true, sorry. We've got Broken. That's your division, BPG, so it's no wonder you're last. In my own division, I have BGT 2110 and also Shiny on top, and the league commissioner Jay Shuttlesworth. From day one, it's been a very tough division, and it probably tells you how good I am that I've been on top of it for the last couple of years. In Greywind's division, we have All That Power, Dixie Flatline, and Hellfark. Is that how you say it? I just sound like it. Did I say fuck again? I did say fuck again. Okay, cool. So, yeah, no, it's also a tough division. I think it's generally fought out between Greywind and All That Power, though. So, but it's a good league. Lots of active people. So
you had your thinking time, Brash, or do you need more?
Yeah, I'm just having a look at looking at the league standings from last year for starters, or the standings for the 2020 season, and clearly they're a very active lot. I think other than the 3 learned gentlemen who are part of this league who have logged on tonight for this podcast, no one's logged on in the last 20 days. So obviously we are in the dark period of football, the football calendar, yeah. But look, the tight end thing, you did ask me about the tight end thing. The interesting thing is you could actually start 3 tight ends if you liked in this league. Tight end is such an annoying spot. It's almost like teams that you avoid in fantasy football that have running back by committee approaches, in that you just never know who's going to be there on the goal line to cannibalise those touchdowns, yeah? You even get tight ends, offensive tackles reporting as eligible receivers these days. So it's a hard league. So on one hand, I can sort of understand, BPG, why you've struggled, but on the other hand, I sort of don't, because everyone should be struggling as well. So it seems like a league where you make sure you stock up on your tight ends and you're set, yeah?
But just picking up on Blackie's point, have a look at this year's draft, and is that what people were doing? Were they stocking up on tight ends?
No, well, that's what I don't understand. That's really interesting in that it's a league where, I like, as Blackie said, I like the idea of only having a maximum of 2 and only starting 1 quarterback, and even reducing the running back. The way running backs are going now, that's almost the one that you want to flick 3 or 4 positions. But tight end, to do that becomes the guts of your scoring power of your game day roster. And it's amazing that, looking at the draft, Gronkowski was the first tight end taken. But then again, I guess in a keeper league, dynasty keeper league, you're not letting go your good ones in a hurry either, are you?
in fairness, it wasn't a strong NFL draft for tight ends.
Yeah, and I was just thinking
has been in the past.
Yeah, and as the point before, that when we were talking earlier about the tight ends, and someone said about the impact young tight ends are going to have on the league, well, with an abbreviated, disrupted off season, how effective is the tight end going to be given the complexity of the playbook they have to learn? So yeah, it's a fair point, but if that is the way that the league goes, BPG, I probably expect you to continue your streak.
First round pick. Woo! But just to pick up on your point, I'm sure, Brash, you will have already identified that there's nobody in the league in the last few years who would have spent a second round pick on a tight end, a young, promising, developing tight end at a performing team, and then dropped that person within 2 years for not traded them, dropped them, cut them completely cold. That wouldn't have happened, would it?
No, but you wouldn't expect so. That's a fair bit of draft capital give up. It remains to be seen whether that may be surpassed by someone using a third round pick on a tight end that may not even make the roster of their team.
I gave you an opening to criticise my squad. It was me and Goder. I dropped drafted him in the second round and then dumped him for nothing.
No,
Jeez, I'm never giving you that.
I'm more
BGG
focusing on.
dropped him faster than that dude at the restaurant.
At least someone's on for him tonight.
No, apologies. I'm focusing on what you've got going now. That's history, right? That is all right. If you want me to make a comment on it, so you've lost 11 in a row. I wonder why. Right. And I'm seeing a bit of history repeating itself, like Cole Kmet. Is that how you spell his name? Kmet? Sort of should be. I feel like there should be an apostrophe in there somewhere. You've taken him in the third round. Is he guaranteed even getting a roster spot, or at best a game day jersey?
I hope so, or else my streak really is continuing.
I think there's no doubt about it, mate. Let me have a look at the schedule you've got.
Schedule. So, Greywin, how do you think the draft went this year? We went pretty early. I mean, we were well and truly done before June was really underway.
Yeah, we kicked off very early, and we were pretty quick through this draft from memory. I don't think we really had any holdups. We drafted very quickly. Just going on the point of tight ends drafted, there were 9 tight ends drafted in the entire draft. We drafted 9 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds amongst everyone, which shows you it's a very offensive league, this one, with the amount of wide receivers, running backs that you can start. The interesting one, of course, we pointed out was the Gronkowski pick in the second round, or the third pick of the second round. I think it's a bit hard to tell how everyone's gone, as there's no training camp that people can. I know everyone sets the world on fire in training camp, but we've got absolutely nothing to really go on. We're sort of still basing how they think we'll go in their rookie season based off the NFL draft combines and last year's college season. It's going to be a very, like I said earlier, I think it's going to be a very interesting season for rookies. I think a lot of them are really going to struggle, apart from the running backs. I think it's going to be very difficult for any wide receiver to make an immediate impact, trying to learn the playbook and get used to a new quarterback. You might have actually picked one of the more impactful players in Chase Young. He's an edge, right? He's going to be rushing the quarterback. Those guys can generally put up some decent numbers as rookies, but this year, if they play, he could put up some pretty good numbers just based on his position.
Thank you. See, Brasher, that's how you give positive feedback.
I mean, the rest of your draft was average, but that's...
I don't know why you're laughing. Average is a compliment. Just going from my notes, I thought there are a couple of surprises in the first round. Moss taken at pick 10, Dillon taken at pick 12. It indicates to me that running backs are valued more highly than wide receivers. I think outside of that, I was also surprised that Jefferson was taken before Judy, but that's probably personal preference. And I think in terms of, and Cam Akers taken at 4, I think in terms of things that didn't surprise me was seeing you pick 1. Another thing that I caught late in the draft that really, really interested me was the commissioner taking Will Lutz on pick before Justin Herbert. I mean, to me, that's a remarkable pick. I think kickers are easily replaceable, and you take the upside of much maligned quarterback. I think, even if Herbert is just a mid-range starter, he's still much more valuable than any kicker. And I think the person I'll give the most props to is Broken. I think he absolutely nailed the draft.
What did he do that was so much better than what Fui did? Time-limited answer, please.
I think J.K. Dobbins is a really, really good pick at pick 6. I would take him before Akers. Again, probably personal preference. I think Pittman's a really, really good pick at the 18th pick. And I think to get Chua in the middle of the third round, in between Lynn Bowden and Darrington Evans is seriously good value. And then he just stocked up on players that, will play a role outside of Royce Freeman, which was a bit of a head scratcher because he is stick a fork in him. Might as well be paying league minimum at the Patriots. He's so done.
No Denver fan envy there.
And then we've got Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay now, so he's well back on the. I'd say it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't make the roster.
Ooh, Fui, you've remarkably escaped criticism so far. How do you think Greywind went in the draft?
Well, first things first, you can't really criticise perfection, can you? I actually like he actually got a couple of players before that I would hope would last to my pick, 4 picks later, but didn't end up happening. So thanks for that. One of those was Troutman, the tight end. I don't think I could have drafted any more tight ends anyway, to be honest, but because I am full. Yeah, no, not too bad. I wouldn't be unhappy with it. Lamb obviously is the gem. Obviously, we all hope he fails because he plays for the Cowboys, but good luck there. A couple of running backs. I'm not sold on Devin Funchess at the Packers, so we should have just drafted a receiver, let's be honest. Well, we won't go into that again.
Oh, yes, we will. Yes, we will go into that again.
Just on Funchess and wide receivers, why did Kenny Stills last so long? Who else are they going to throw to in Houston?
Injury prone.
But who else are they going to throw to in Houston?
Brandon Cooks.
Oh, yeah, okay. Like I said, who else are they?
You forget who the coach is. The problem with picking Stills is he's just as likely to be traded in 3 weeks' time for a 7th rounder from the 2027 draft.
Yeah, and he might go to a good club too.
He probably will, knowing their trading habits as well. Could be the steal of the draft.
Look, mate, I'm not expecting Kenny Stills to be a 1st or 2nd rounder, but I'd have picked him before a few of the other guys that went.
So we probably wrap up our analysis of the league, and we might start because Blackie's had a pretty heavy go at me, so he can just be quiet for a little while. Brash, what's your view, moving away from the draft and how the recent draft went, looking across the different rosters, and take your time if you need it, of the people like Shuttlesworth and Broken and Shiny on top and other guys from the board, have you gotten any advice for some of them on how to improve their rosters, apart from just paying you money to tell them who to pick each week?
Just having a look at my notes.
Notes? What are notes?
Only that, the guest made notes and so did Blackie. God damn.
Brash, I think if we link a few things you've said tonight, everyone should be rushing out to get Jace Amaro. I think he's 23 years old if he was drafted 2 years ago, and he's going to have a breakout season at tight end.
He's going to have a breakout season at tight end. I might have got his age wrong, but I reckon there's a couple of back, just forgetting the silliness for a minute. I think there's a couple of teams here that might be a little bit quarterback challenged, which surprises me considering most teams are only holding 2, or you can only hold 2 on the roster. That's right, yeah? You can only hold
3.
I fear like the Hall of Famers could be boom or bust with Locke and Stafford. Broken Bones, Watson and Jones, that could be boom and bust as well. And there's one that I really worried about, which was not the lucky Sevens because they lucked out.
They did not luck out. They were just really well drafted.
Yeah, I think, and forgive me if I get the name wrong, but Los Borichos with Allen and Winston and Mayfield. Look, you can't start all 3 of them in the one spot. And hope they add up to a decent. They 3 worry me from a quarterback perspective on that roster. I think Winterfell's solid. I think the biggest problem or the biggest issue Winterfell's going to have is picking the opponent, starting based on opponent. The Las Vegas injury cursed as well. Haskins, Mariota, Goff. Geez, Goff would want to play a bit better than he did last year. So
he did draft Burrow though.
Is he going to start anywhere in a hurry?
He would be opening day starter.
But is he going to perform? Would he be your starter for your fantasy team immediately?
I'm the quarterback whisperer.
What's an intercept worth in your league?
I think it's -4. I think, or is it -3?
Brasher, you clearly weren't listening last week. Burrows is already in the Hall of Fame according to Fooey. Of course, he's gonna talk him up.
The quarterback whisperer. Okay.
He's the quarterback whisperer if all he whispers to them is your cut.
Yeah, that's right.
I genuinely almost spat out my drink then. Thank you.
So I think that pretty much wraps up our panel of advice. Any last thoughts, Blackie, on what we should do? As given you're a non-participant in the league, you can kind of throw stones for once.
I was writing a list of my one piece of advice for all the team.
Well, let's hear it.
I only got halfway through.
But you were taking notes.
Yeah, I have taken notes. So for Jesus, I would say sell Lamar Jackson and ride Kyler, get peak return for Lamar. I guess it's all predicated on whether this team is active in the trades. If it's hard to move players for appropriate value, then you'd probably have to reconsider. BPG, for you, I've got get a co-owner. Someone who's keen to take on a project. For a lot of these are trade people at peak value, again, predicated on if you can actually find a trade partner. For local knowledge, I'd trade Godwin at peak value. I think he's going to take a step back this year. And with these additional whispers that Antonio Brown might be signed by Bucks, that would send his value plummeting. For lucky sevens, I would cut Rodgers. I doubt you're finding a trade partner. And I would trade Devontae Adams for a running back because the cupboard is bare. For Dixie, I would trade Derrick Henry. And that's the end of the note. So we're going to be working on the fly here. I mean, Manu Reid needs to sort out he's got Burrow, but out Hall of Fame. Oh yeah, I reiterated my point from last week on Drew Lock being. There's a good chance that he'll never be more valuable than he is now, and then I additionally added that if given that he has three strong running backs in Sanders, Cook, and Kamara, I would look at moving Kamara. The reason I say that is his value dropped significantly when Drew wasn't on the field, and I said even if Drew doesn't insult his teammates any further, it's still a good chance it's his last season. If he does, he probably won't live through the month. I ignored Powerhouse completely because if anyone who's spoken to the bloke knows he's not going to take any advice from anyone, no matter how much his team looks terrible.
So the son of GG, really?
Yeah, exactly. More GG than GG. And for Grey Wind, we touch on your roster a little bit later, but I actually think Wentz is significantly undervalued at the moment. And then Trash Pandas, I actually liked their draft as well. I think they got value for Herbert. I think Swift is a bit of a head scratcher in terms of people being down on him for being drafted to Detroit. I think he's a good enough talent to buck the trend for Detroit running backs, and he's got a few other good pieces as well in Thomas and Cooper. And I actually think N'Keal Harry could potentially be a good option. And the reason I think that is because their cupboard's pretty bare at wide receiver. And I think any new players that were picked up this year, it's going to be hard to learn the Patriots playbook, which is notoriously difficult to learn. So I'm thinking it could be a second-year bump for N'Keal.
Fui, you got anything to add in your own defence?
No, not really. Not really. Not really. Obviously, it was very running back heavy early, which kind of messed up my plan a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with what I got. I filled the holes I needed to fill.
I have to bump Fui's draft down now that I've learned he had a plan.
Yeah, his plan was pretty basic and very Fui. Just focus on the holes, find them, and try to fill them.
I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going to get you in a lot of trouble.
Chief will ban me.
So I should add, given this is our first review of the draft and one or two of our more esteemed turkeys may have said something that people feel offended by or the need to reply, that we will feature a right of reply. For the next 2 weeks after this segment is posted, you'll have the right to reply if you're one of the participants in the draft. You can explain how it is that Brasher doesn't know anything about what he's talking about, or Blackie just needs to take more notes. Or you can dare to agree with their posts, and I'll just use my mod powers to delete your comment. Enjoy that right of reply, and if you're really worked up, we might even get you on to actually come back at the panelists and contest their views. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be doing another Fantasy Comp review very shortly. Thanks, guys. And also, Greywind, welcome to Four Turkeys. I hope the experience wasn't too scarring.
Oh, no, I'm all good, mate. I'll seek some therapy later, and we'll be good.
Oh well, don't worry. We've got some really important therapeutic opportunities lined up for you just in the next segment. You're about to enjoy the buffet with Fui.
Perfect. Let's get it on.